teams expect the league to tell them to start recalling their players as soon as next week, and there'll be a 2-week quarantine back in markets. Some teams might go directly to Disney to start training or somewhere in between. But the league has started, to not only put the plans in place for a return in terms of testing and safety health-wise, but really digging this week into what that format is going to look like.
And I think to the basketball fan, that's obviously the most important piece of this. What is it going to look like when it comes back? Big Perk is still with us, and Brian Windhorst joins us this morning as well. And Windy, you and I have talked about this many times. The NBA has long, I think, flirted with the idea of doing away with the conferences when it gets to the playoffs and just seeding the teams 1 through 16. And travel has been the reason they can't. Is this the opportunity to try it?
Yeah, so over the next 4 days, Greeny, there's going to be a lot of backroom haggling to try to figure out what they're going to present to the owners on Friday. And one of the things I think that is really going to come out of this, I really think there's a good chance this is only going to be a 16-team playoff. And if that is the case, it opens up the possibility for something that Adam Silver has long wanted, which is to seed 1 through 16 in the postseason and go that route. There's no excuse with travel or anything like that. It would have to pass an owner vote, and that means a bunch of Eastern Conference owners would have to agree to it. But if there's a way to make this interesting and spice this up and potentially test out this theory, you're never going to get a better opportunity if that's the direction they go.
I agree. And Big Perk, I'd like to get your take on this because you played on really good teams in both conferences. Do you think that, look, that would be, it's easy for Windy and I to sit here and say this is a great idea. I happen to love it. But it also was doing away with basically the entire history of the sport. As a player, do you think the players would be in favor of it, considering how enormous the change would be?
Absolutely, Greeny. I mean, when you think about the history of it, think about how many times, like in the Western Conference, where teams had a better record than most teams in the East and they didn't make the playoffs. So I think it would make it fair, and I think teams, you would look at changing that East being weak narrative. And I think it would be great for the league because now you have the 16 most best teams instead of the conferences. And I think it would be best for the league because now teams that are deserving to be in will be there. Because it was so many times, especially when I was playing in the Western Conference, where that 9th, 10th, and 11th spot were better. And if they were in the East, they would be in the 5th or 4th slot. So I think change is better. It's almost like, Green, I'm from the country. So it's almost like me having collard greens and then adding them ham hocks to the collard greens. It brings a different flavor and a different dynamic to it because I love to eat. So I think the change will be great and it's needed.
I like it, and I like the analogy to it as well. Windy, it's a different level to it now. Let's make sure are we talking about, he's talking about literally putting the 16 best teams in the playoffs. You and I think we're talking about the idea of taking the 2 8s and then seeding them 1 through 16. But in the long run, I like his idea, too. In the long run, could we be seeing the beginning of what would be changes to the NBA as we have long known it?
Not in that way, because here's the thing. Any major change like this to the NBA would require 20 votes from the owners, 20 of 30 votes. And you're just not getting 5 Eastern Conference owners to vote the opportunity for them not to make the playoffs. I'm not saying they would do that this year. I'm saying 1 through 16 of the teams that have qualified for the playoffs. I think you're going to always be guaranteed to get 8 from each conference, Perk. But I will say this. I still think it's going to be a hard pass. I mean, it's something that they're going to try to get. But if you're Milwaukee, why would you vote for it this year? You might have to beat both the Clippers and the Lakers to win your title. If you're Boston, you're now a 5 seed. If you're Philadelphia, you're now a 12 seed. And what do you think the Brooklyn Nets would vote for? The Brooklyn Nets, if they did 1 through 16, you want to talk about a delicious storyline? They would open up by playing the Lakers in a series. Now, I know that Woj just said Kevin Durant's not coming back, but think about that for a second. So I still think the stumbling block is the fact that you'd need the East owners to do it. But if you're ever going to do it, and you could convince them to sign in a one-off situation, it would be in this moment. And all of this stuff is getting haggled out behind the scenes. Right now, everything is still on the table. 30 teams is still on the table. But the more people I talk to, the more people in the league think that it's going to end up being a playoffs-only scenario. And to spice it up, this is something that I think Adam Silver is going to bring to the table.
Big fella, you talk to so many players with a variety of different things that you're doing right now. What are you hearing from the guys as this is starting to feel real now? It's one thing to say, yes, we'd like to come back and play. Now it's starting to feel like it's time where they're going to be traveling to their markets, they're going to be quarantining, they're going to be getting in shape, and then if it goes the way we expect it to, everybody's going to Disney World to start playing. What are you hearing from the players right now, Kendrick Perkins?
Well, right now I'm hearing that the guys are excited. Hey, Greeny, they had this old saying that says you never know what you got until it's gone. And I think guys realize that when we went through this pandemic, you know, we grew up as basketball players, the love for the game. So guys want to get back to playing. And when you look at older guys like, you know, guys that are 30 plus, they know their window of opportunity is small. So they can't take a year for granted or you know, miss a year out on trying to win a title. Like when that window is small, like a LeBron James, James Harden or Russell Westbrook that are all over their 30s and they got a great chance at winning a title, they got to make sure that they able to capitalize on it. So from what I'm hearing, guys are excited and they're ready to get back to work and get back to playing basketball.
Yes, and the messaging from the players has been almost exclusively that, which is in such stark contrast to what we've heard from the baseball players, which is such an interesting side to this to me. Very quickly, Windy, is it your expectation they'll bring everybody back if they're just going to, if essentially we're just trying to figure out a way to get to the playoffs as quickly as possible? Do they bring all 30 teams back, or do they just bring some moderated version of that to get to a postseason?
Technically, that's still under discussion. The GMs are going to have a call this week before the owners to hash that out, their opinion. But it is cheaper, safer, and shorter to do the playoff teams. And that is where I would guess that it's going to go. Not a done deal. That's where I, knowing what I know, would guess that it's going to end up.
Me too. And finally,